Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. I am joined here by Kyle from Read by Kyle today, and we are going to be talking about The Speaking Bones by Ken Liu, which is the last book in the Dandelion Dynasty. We were both lucky enough to receive ARCs of this book after we interviewed Ken a few months ago. Time means nothing. It might have been a year ago, whenever we interviewed
3 months ago.
Okay. I don't know. You can check out that interview. I will link it up there. It was very interesting. As of the time this video is dropped, Speaking Bones should have just come out. So we are going to start with a non-spoiler review discussion, and then we will move into spoilers so you could come back to the video later once you have read the book. Sound good, Kyle?
Absolutely.
Hey, Kyle, how did you feel about the book overall?
Well, at first, I thought that it was going to let me down at about the halfway point because it is a very sad book for parts of it, but it ended up being absolutely incredible. I think that Wall of Storms probably piqued my total investment in the plot. So Speaking Bones is a little bit less good in my view than Wall of Storms, but overall, I just think it's a brilliant ending. Ken Liu cemented himself as this being one of my favorite series of all time. And I felt the most amount of emotions in this book than I did than any of the other ones. I feel like I ran the entire gambit. I was so angry. I was so scared. I was so happy. I cried of happiness. I cried tears of, sadness. I worried for characters. I laughed. Everything in the human experience, I experienced. And so overall, I just have mostly extremely positive things to say about this. And my minor nitpicks is that sometimes Ken just develops, 7 pages of backstory on an admiral that then never does anything. And I'm like, did we need this, Ken? But overall, it's an enthusiastic 5 stars for me.
Yeah, and it was a 4.5 from me, which we can talk about later because, well, we'll get there. But yeah, I also loved the book. We both loved the book. It was, I think, in the end, even after we talk a little bit about some of the hardships we had with the book, it ended in the absolute only way I felt like Dandelion Dynasty could end. Once I finished the book, it was this catharsis of that was the right ending. That was the
Yes,
ending
absolutely.
the series was coming to. That's what it needed to be. And it for sure is now in my top 10 series of all time. And similar to you, even though I think we both agreed Wall of Storms, I think, is the tightest storytelling of the 4. But this was for sure the most emotional of the 4 because you have 3,000 pages of baggage. And I cared so deeply about so many characters. And, I think, let's see, it's it's almost 1,100 pages. And I think I read the first 500 or 600 pages over the course of a week and a half. And then I read the last 550 pages in 2 days. And I had to emotionally, it wasn't a good idea. I was messaging you so upset.
It's the only time you've ever shamed me for not being at the same speed as you. Normally, take your time. We all have busy lives. You can do whatever. And then you were just like, why aren't you at the same page? I need you on this page immediately.
Yeah, that's what you have to I would recommend, if you can, reading this book with somebody, only because I felt like I had to talk about it that moment. That's what I was messaging Kyle. I'd be like, something just happened and I have to talk to someone about it. This is so upsetting. I need someone to tell me it's all going to be okay. Yeah.
It was very emotional, and so it was just very tense. And there was a couple nights where I was reading it before bed, and then I would stop reading it, and then I would go and I would lay down, and my chest would be tight with anger. I would be trying to go to bed, and I would just be mad at some characters, and I'm like, wow, this is really, really affecting.
Yeah, I think what's really important for both of us to tell people is I went into this because in our interview with Ken Liu, he was like, well, I'm a hopeful person. So you just have to keep that in mind. I believe in hope. So I feel like that influenced you and I to go into Speaking Bones being
Yeah.
oh, everything's gonna be great.
I vividly remember messaging you being like, Ken is a liar. This is not
Yes,
hopeful.
you did. So I just want to warn everyone, the first 1,000 pages of this book
If you can hold tight for the first 1,000 pages.
are sad and stressful. And you're like, how is this possibly going to end in a way that makes me feel hopeful at all for the world at large? And then the last 100 pages help give context to everything that happened.
Yes, absolutely.
It's crazy how he did that.
his theme work, I think, is just impeccable.
Oh,
Like the what you were talking about earlier with you giving it 4.5 stars, just for anybody watching. For most of the book, I was like complaining. Like I was like, this is too negative. Like we've reached the pinnacle where I now am going to dock this book for being too sad. And then she was like, book one was liking it more than me. And then at the end, I reached the end, and I was like, she woke up to my message being like, "How you're a monster? How did you not give this 5 stars?" Like, I think the ending just totally recontextualizes all of the things that have come before it, from all the way to the first book. You totally
yes.
see what Ken has been trying to do, and I don't think I could imagine an ending that could possibly be better. Like, I mean, maybe I would want like a character to have survived or like a different outcome for that character, but in terms of what the story needed, it was absolutely impeccable. And it reminds me a lot of my favorite TV show, The Wire. David Simon, the creator of that show, is famously kind of like a curmudgeon. And a lot of people had like popular characters in that show, like Omar and Stringer and stuff. And people, when the show was on, they'd be like, "We want more Omar, we want more Stringer." And he has a famous quote that he said about this, which is that the audience is like a child being fed for dinner, and they just want candy all the time. They want candy. They want more Omar. They want more of this character, that character. But I, as the storyteller, am the parent that has to tell the story the way that it needs to be told. And it's like, no, you need your vegetables. You need the story that is part, or you need the part of the story that is necessary. And that's exactly what I feel like Ken did, because so many of the things in this book I do not like. I do not agree with. I wish they didn't happen that way. It has some of the most hateable villains I've ever seen in my entire life, but it is also a perfect ending.
Yeah, and it's you're so right, because, and we'll talk about it in the spoiler section, there is a specific character that did not get the ending I needed in my soul. And I even told Kyle at one point, like, I'm docking a full star for this character. But in the end, like, you see, and especially there is a story. It doesn't come to almost 700 pages in, but there is one of his kind of stories within a story. And I think that might have been one of my favorite parts of the entire novel, because in this story within a story, Liu lays out so simply all of these themes that every book has been building to in such an amazing way. And ultimately, what it was telling you was like, there can still be a triumphant ending, but you have to understand the real suffering to get there. But it said, history has no plot and kings do not follow character arcs. And
Yeah,
oh
I
gosh, I
wrote
don't
that
know
down.
if I've read a quote that resonated with me more,
Hmm.
especially after what we've read, you
Yeah.
know, with all these books, and all of a sudden him just laying it out like that in such a poignant way was just like, oh, that's what I'm reading. And I don't know,
Hmm.
I just really hit me.
Yeah, I really like that too. And the story within a story aspect, I think some people struggle with. I am one of those people. I've had people messaging me during Wall of Storms. There's like a big flashback sequence in Wall of Storms, and a lot of people were like, "Is there a point to this?" And then there's like a story within a story, and sometimes those feel in the moment like they aren't necessary. It's like, why are we spending this much time on it? And they always come back later to being really good. But what I really liked about that one is that immediately it tied everything. Like I didn't need to wait to understand why this like story within a story was there. I was just like, this is like the thematic statement of the series.
Yes, it was amazing. And I will say my point five that I took off, even though I think it was an amazing ending, is I will go on the record saying I think there was about 100 pages that could be cut out. I think
Absolutely.
here and
Yeah.
there was like a couple times where the flashbacks did not do it for me. And you already mentioned the one that was the biggest one for me, that random admiral at the end. In fairness, that was in my deepest depression of like, Ken's a liar. This isn't a hopeful book. And so,
I
like,
finished. I finished the book. I still think that 7 pages should have been cut. I'm sorry.
you
I
know,
don't.
no, and I agree. I do think it's colored by our like,
Yeah.
it's never going to end. So I do think there's like a solid 100 pages that can make it a tighter story. I do think Wall of Storms, almost everything in there felt necessary by the end. I do still think there's about 10-page segments here and there in this novel that just really didn't necessarily need to be there. And because I'm grumpy and heartless, like you said, Kyle, I took the 0.5 off. But overall, I think we both agree it was like just a excellent end.
Yeah. And then there was just like structure problems, which I would be curious to talk to Ken about in terms of like how he decided to cut the books, because the books are like Veiled Throne and Speaking Bone are cut like almost literally in half. And the resolution of a plot line, like not a total resolution, but kind of like a mini resolution, comes pretty early on in Speaking Bones. And I just feel like both narratives would have been tighter of the Veiled Throne, and maybe tightening up both books a little bit just so that like you could fit it into Veiled Throne. and that like soured me on the beginning of the book. But like most of my like little nitpicks went away by the time I got to the end. But that was something that while reading it, I was like, oh, this just makes so much more sense to give people like a little bit of an emotional ending at the Veiled Throne, and then you open up the Speaking Bones with this thing happening, and then you can go from there. It kind of tells like one cohesive part of the story. But other
I
than
mean, he
that,
did tell us he literally just cut it in half. So,
yeah,
I mean, I think it wasn't. I agree with that, and I do think like more than ever, it's important to note if you're watching this and you haven't started Veiled Throne that you need to really treat these like one novel. I'm not saying you have to read them
absolutely.
necessarily back to back, but I would read them pretty close together
Hmm.
narratively just to kind of finish this stuff up. But yes, if you haven't started the Dandelion Dynasty, this is your message that it's going to be worth it,
The ending
which I think a
sticks.
lot of people are waiting for. I think a lot of people are waiting for it to be finished before they start
Yeah, for
because
sure.
they feel nervous about unfinished works or whatever. But I can say like it was worth it. Like everything we read, like it all came together in the perfect way, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Okay, you ready to do spoilers?
Let's do the spoilers.
Okay, so if you have not read The Speaking Bones, please stop. Really, please stop. We are going to talk about some major spoilers for the series, but then you can just come back when you need catharsis and to talk about what happened. What do you want to do first, Kyle? What do you want to chat about?
I think that you have some things that you have to get off your chest. So let's start with that.
So we're talking about Timu.
Yeah.
Yeah. My justice for Timu. I asked Ken justice for Timu, and he laughed and said, "Oh no." And I thought he was joking. And
Could have
what
went
he
either
really
way.
was saying was, "Oh no," because there was no justice.
It's
So
not even that there was justice. It was anti-justice. It
it was
was
anti-justice.
flagrant disrespect by No to Me, who is easily one of the like most despicable characters I've ever read about. There's a
I
moment when he is going to be flayed alive, and I was like, "Yes, flay this human being alive." And then it doesn't happen, and I was upset. And I was like, "I never knew that I would be pro flaying."
well, we did talk about that a lot, Kyle, in this book, that it made us very violent. Like I told you that like normally I'm all like pro peace, pro work it out. And this book was like, kill the people, destroy them. I don't want to hear from them anymore. Please go away. But yeah, Timu, that was really hard for me. I was really upset because No to Me didn't kill him right away. So I really was thinking, like, okay, here it is. I had like, here's the justice. And then
Hmm.
it was like 80 pages later, because he switches from perspectives, and you come back and Timu's head is just severed and there. And I was just like, I still actually can barely talk about how rage I feel. The only thing that made me feel better is that his daughter, Diana, I think is talking to Sarah. She basically says, like, even I am the production of sexual assault, basically. She was talking about how complicated it is that they're so intertwined, and how do you make it different from those that were consensual or not. And she readily admits that, like, my existence is because of this non-consenting thing. And just that it was said out loud by
Hmm.
somebody finally, that like Timu was a victim this entire time from beginning to end, that gave me a little bit of catharsis. It's like what I needed was like everyone to just realize that none of this, that he was a victim. And it was really hard for me seeing him weeping over Kanavanaki's body was just really hard for me. But I understood that was reality. Like
Hmm.
that's just reality. I don't know. That whole story was really hard for me. I don't necessarily think what he did was wrong with the character. I think that's probably what was going to happen. I just didn't make me happy.
Yeah. Bouncing off of this actually is something I thought of just right now. The stuff with Diana at the end really kind of juxtaposes Kikomi's story at the beginning, because she's a woman who has to do what she needs to do to rescue her kingdom, and then she's like castigated as like somebody who's just out for power, and like because women don't matter, and whatever. And then in book two, Thera is very much like, well, no, like she's a hero too. We need to engage with this. Like she has been thrown to the side, and history has not been kind to her. And then now, like that's kind of what's going to happen with Timu, where it's like people knew that he was a puppet emperor, but I don't think people were really thinking about it, right? That he was just like a prisoner, and he was trying his best to do what he could do to save like
His people.
any person. And I think it was Rui, and I don't remember the two islands, but whatever the two islands were, unredeemed Dara, and then now like his daughter is like kind of being what Thera was to Kikomi, being like, this is my dad was a victim, and I'm the result of this horrendous thing, and now we have to come to terms with that as a people, and that's kind of what the whole ending is about to me, which is that like all these atrocities and horrible things were committed, but we have to try to move past them. We have to find a way, and it's not going to be easy. It is not going to be, I really like that at the end when it flashed forward, it wasn't just like everything's now cozy. I think I would have actually given it like a 4 or 4.5 if that was the thing. But like the perspectives are still very much like, yes, some things are better, but they also made mistakes with some of these laws that they passed. It sounded good at the time, but not all laws sound like pass the test of time as a good idea. And I just thought that added such realism to what would actually happen instead of it just being like, and now everybody's happy.
I'm gonna be honest, this is embarrassing. You kind of made me a little emotional when you talked about Timu and Princess Kokomo. I never thought of that, and it was like,
Yeah, I didn't either. Yeah.
that made me a little emotional. Like that is what it was, and it was interesting because, like you pointed on, the ending was so full of hope, but it wasn't perfect. And it was just interesting how the ending, like, because it was, I mean, it isn't, but it was almost like the end of the Dandelion Dynasty in some ways. Like Gia and Cooney and all these people were dead. And then the ending that Diana becomes the leader, who is this blend of both the Dara people and the Liusu people, like that was an ending I didn't think I would ever want. But when it happened was like so good. It was like, oh, this is how we are blending, just how Thera and Takaval had to do that over in the Scrublands. Yeah. It was like this very interesting parallel. Yeah, it's almost like, okay, we've struggled for decades and now we've gone somewhere like maybe we have hope for the future. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It ended up working really
also
well.
I was mad this whole book, and I still kind of am. Zomi was, I mean, one of the best characters I've ever written about, because she is trying so hard to do the right thing, but she makes mistakes. She is complicit in a lot of big problems, even though when she starts in Wall of Storms, she is this idealist and she wants to reform everything. And then, constantly throughout the series, people are telling her, like, the world is not black and white. Like, you have to live in the gray. And at times, I feel like throughout the series, she kind of goes too far into the gray, just in terms of how much she's willing to let slide to get some other goal finished. And so in Speaking Bones, I feel like she almost didn't have an arc. And then she gets put in prison for like the second half of the book. And I was like, you're going to do me dirty like this, Ken? Because like all of the characters in this book are just like fantastic. Like I don't think there's a weak spot in terms of like the characterization of the characters, but Zomi is just such a special character. But then at the very end, when her and Thera met, that was when I cried tears of joy. I was like, oh, this is like very, very emotional. And
and it could have been cheesy. It could have been
could
cheesy,
have been,
but
yeah.
instead it was like, it was the emotional moment you needed of these two people coming back together who have seen so much in their life and have done so much. And then coming back together was like the perfect. Well, and I've always loved Thera and Zomi's story. I loved how it paralleled Jin and Luan's story. I always just really loved how.
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
It literally says it in Wall of Storms. I mean, I thought of it before it said it, but like at the end when they part.
I mean, I must have thought about it, but then I haven't thought about it since Wall of Storms. I didn't think about it in Speaking Bones at all.
Because before the narrative said it, I already thought like, oh my gosh, they're doing what Jin and Luan did, because that made me mad too. And now Zomi and Thera are like, duty is more important, which it was, but that's fine. But so then having them come back together instead of end the way Jin and Luan did was like another catharsis. It was like, okay, we've had like growth cycles where things don't have to end the way they did. I don't know. It was good.
Also, just that like he really played it close to the chest, because it's been like, I mean, he didn't even tell you how long it's been, but it's clearly been a very long time. And most of the characters we know are now dead. And you get that fake out of Thera finally dying when she's like an old lady. And you're like, well, I mean, that was a good life. Like she lived a wonderful life. She did a lot. So you don't feel like sad. Like you're like anybody who dies when they're like in their 90s or however old, that's a good thing if they've lived a good life.
They've lived that long. Yes.
Yeah. And then, you get all this people coming. And even when Thera showed up, I was like, okay, well, Zombie's going to be dead. Like, it's been a long time. And, like, it was just right at the very end. And then Zombie showed up. And I was like, oh, man. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. We needed just a little. We needed you to throw out the bone.
Yeah.
Like a little bit. I really liked it. And, Thera ended up, as someone I didn't care a ton about, I'll say, in Speaking Bones, she ended up becoming probably one of my favorite people. Just her character arc was Absolutely. So interesting.
It made me really, oh, I guess I should have said this in an unspoiler section, but it doesn't matter. It made me really happy that the cooking section added so much to this book,
Yes.
because I think, well, that's a lot of people's trouble, is they're like, not that it's poorly written, but it's like, how does this matter in the grand scheme of things? And I feel like the development of Henry and Farah is just so good. Plus, like all the side characters, like Ratai Yaru, the woman in the wheelchair, the
I knew
inventor.
who you're talking about.
Yeah, she is a phenomenal side character. Like, such good representation, such good, like, just to have a grave digger, or like, sorry, a grave robber that then becomes like this like genius inventor that's like kind of living around the edges, to then becomes like, one of the people of a revolution to like start a war. Like, I just like, that's such a great character. And so all that stuff does become very relevant. And I really was glad that I went through a 200-page cooking
I also said
expedition to get there.
Farah, not Farah, but I like that part too.
Really? Oh, I didn't know you said that. I thought you said Farah.
No,
Well,
Farah became one
regardless,
of my
the
favorite people.
cooking section. Thera was great the whole time. You're a meanie.
Well, no, I never disliked her. I'm just saying I wouldn't say she was like one of my favorite people on a list. But by Speaking Bones, like all the stuff that happened in the Scrublands, like I was actively like wanting to be in her point of view more than other people, which just in the past hadn't necessarily been the case. But no, I loved Farrah's thing too. Like by the end, you're right. Like everything became interesting, and it definitely had, I think, some of the best / worst villains, like best written, but people I hated just more than anyone. No to Me, Kutenrovo. Shall we talk about Gia?
We have to talk about Gia.
We have to talk
Gia.
about
Gia, I feel like, is the most discussable character in the series for sure, but also just like one of the most I've ever read.
Period.
Because you could just like, I feel like I could line up 50 people who have read this whole series and ask them what they think about Gia, and they're going to think differently. Like they're it is just such a complicated
Infinite
issue,
possibilities on how to think about Gia.
So what is your takeaway from Gia?
You know what? My takeaway is that I don't even know how I feel about Gia, because on the one hand, I was like, Gia, you're unforgivable. Everything you've done, it's unforgivable. It cannot happen. And then I was talking to you and you're like, well, but Dara was pretty great when she was doing all this stuff. And it's like this problem I'm having where like, I was so angry because I kept reading about unredeemed Dara. And I was like, can you just go get Timu already? Like, just, you've abandoned him. What's this like not fighting thing? And then like hearing all of the, like there was, I think it was those two guards, their perspective was so neat, where he's basically like, we're like, Dara's been pretty great. Everyone's thriving. Everyone's happy. And it was just this interesting, I don't know if I've ever had to think about that. Like just in reality, like the decisions and how from so many different perspectives they can be different. I don't know. It was weird.
So I'm going to pull out Chinese history, Kyle, for just a second.
Good.
So
Good.
One of the things I really liked is that, so Gia is clearly juxtaposed with Mapadere at the very beginning, because, and Mapadere is based on the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang. My pronunciation is going to be bad. And he united China after the Warring States period and brought them all together. But he was a terrible person. I mean, he did a lot of atrocious things, but uniting China is not something that is a small task. It is not insignificant. And so that is kind of the whole part of his legacy, which is that, like, I don't think anybody would call him a good ruler in good faith, but the things that he did resulted in like a lot of good over time, because China would not, I mean, maybe there would have been another 300 years of war or something, who knows? And so one thing I really liked about Gia is that she recognized this cycle, which is an actual cycle that history in general, but also in Chinese history is really prevalent, which is that there's a cycle where a group of heroes get together and like form a rebellion, and then they rebel and they break the dynasty, and then they become the leaders, and then they put all their friends in place as governors and stuff, and then everything's really happy for a little bit, and then the next generation or the generation after that comes, and then the kids aren't loyal to each other anymore because they don't know their grandfather's friends. And so then they start becoming, corrupt, and then new people rise up, and then there's another rebellion, and then they do the same thing. And so this has been an actual cycle that China's done for years and years and years and years. And it's a very big problem throughout all of history, not just in China. And so Gia recognizing that and being like, I want to form a centralized government and be able to get rid of these, like, standing armies and have everything done by bureaucracy. It's very frustrating to read about sometimes because when you're in like Puma Yimu's perspective and he's trying to like fight a battle and you have this like nerdy guy being, well, you can't actually technically, like, it's like, just let the guy be a military commander. But the overall goal of what she's trying to achieve is so impressive and so far-sighted. Like, she is one of the most intelligent characters I've ever read about, because to be able to divorce your own wants from what is best for a lot of people is something that is really hard for almost any human being. And so for her to be able to do that is very, very admirable and respectable. And I do think in the long term, what she did ended up positively benefiting Dara a lot. But I hate her. I absolutely hate her. I hate everything she did. I do not agree whatsoever. I think she's the worst, and I hated every minute of her post book one. And I'm upset. I'm totally upset. And
I
that's
think I'm
how I
gonna have to just take that clip out. You're all like, Chinese history, and she did all these amazing things, but I hate her. So yeah, it made me think, like, was there a way for her to do it without all this secrecy? Was there a
Yeah.
way for her to do it without acting like she had to be the only one who knew everything, and thus having to kill a bunch of people that probably didn't need to be killed? I do have questions about that. And I wonder if it's a character flaw of hers being like, I have to do everything myself. I can't trust anyone. No one would do the things I would do for Dara. And I think that's the tragedy in the story, because I do think
Mhm.
there were people who would have.
Yeah, and people point that out to her. Like, the conversation she has with Kago at the end was phenomenal. And he's just been taking a back seat since the second book. And I was messaging you being like, I really need my guy to do something. And that conversation was really good, where he was like, you didn't really need to do this all by yourself. Like, I honestly think if she had told him, he would have been on board. Even Zomi, I think Zomi would have been on board. If she described Soto would have been on board. I could even see if somebody actually spoke to Piro like he was a human being and not a boy. I could even see him coming around to the idea, because he was kind of working that way in his head already. And that is the
Yeah,
tragedy,
I'm
is
not
that she
sure.
has these character flaws.
I don't think Gia ever would have trusted Pyro. I said Pyro. I
Oh
don't
no,
know.
I don't know, but no, I don't think, I agree she wouldn't have. I'm just saying, if she had, I think he could have come around to the idea if she had explained it and been like, this is what I really want to do. But her desire for secrecy isn't necessarily a bad thing, but her level of secrecy is a bad thing. And like when she kills all the Dyra fans and they like see her as a mom. So she's essentially killing 10 of her kids, which that's
That was
insane.
when she crossed. That was a line. I mean, she crossed so many lines, so I'm not pretending she hadn't. But that was a line that was like, you're straight up villain. Like, there's just, no one can be like, well, to you, like, no, you were just a really bad person, but I get that you did it for a reason, I guess.
Yeah, like she could have easily. I mean, I get that they were like very devoted to her, but she could have sat them all down and been like, "Listen, you guys have been absolutely devoted to me. I appreciate you so much, but this is the last act of my plan, and after it happens, I need you to just chill, just go live lives, you know, cook
Somewhere
cook in
else.
restaurants." And instead, she was just like, "Nope, I can't trust them. I'm gonna murder them all." And so, yeah, she is a villain. I don't think I could buy anybody telling me she's not a villain, but she is one of the best villains I've ever experienced in any medium, because how much I understand and even agree with her goal. Like, I think her results speak for themselves, but I still think she was terrible.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think like Soto and Kogo, and there were some people like that could have been on board. I do think a lot of people couldn't have done what she did with Unredeemed Dara, because she really just
Yeah,
had to give them up. She really had
yeah.
to just be like, well, bye. And I
I
just
mean, a lot
think
of people did though. Like, they kept continuously saying, like, "Well, things are good here. Like, who cares about
that's
that?"
true.
So they did. They were totally
I
on
was
board.
too attached to Timu. I was just one of those people that's like, come on, like
Yeah, you
someone,
were
go get
emotional.
my man out of here. I think she's really interesting. In fact, I was texting you about working on my 5 best villains list, and I would absolutely put her on the list if it wasn't too hard. Like, you have to read the whole series, otherwise you just can't
Yeah.
talk about Gia.
I would say book 2, but book 2 is like people are confused if she's a villain. And then after book
I
2, it's
agree.
like,
That's why I
okay,
feel like
yeah,
you
yeah.
can't talk about it, because we were both still holding on hope after Wall of Storms. I remember being
Mhm.
like, it looks bad, but you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, even after Veiled Throne, like I definitely was like, well, I can't exonerate her after Veiled Throne. But even then I kind of was like, maybe I'll really see the vision.
Yeah.
But then after speaking about it, like I had to give up on it. I was like, I saw your vision, Gia. You were the most interesting character, I think, in the entire series. Gia's were, I really, if I had to choose, would be my favorite perspectives. I always wanted to know what was going on with Gia, but you are a villain. There's just really, you are, even though you did all this great stuff.
Absolutely. And you know, I was like maybe like 2/3 of the way through the book, and I realized that almost all, I mean, there's Pyro, whatever. But other than that, almost everything else is female centric. Like all of the characters
Mm.
are very strong, different females, and especially because
You've
your
got
content so much lately.
Farah's boyfriend.
Oh, he's listen. He has 7 pages in the whole book. Okay, let's
No,
just
he
relax.
doesn't. He
Yes,
has
he
more
does.
than
No, no, no,
7
no.
pages.
Last book, I agree with you. Last book, he was fine. He was good. This book, he just shows up and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna be here with broken bottle and wet trash can, and then we're gonna just sit here." So he was not a main character in this book. I don't agree with you. But but yeah, like you know, like if you look at the Goodreads, right, like the list of reviews for Grace of Kings, the first like 5 that aren't Petricks are like, there's not really any women in this story, and that just makes me sad because people are going to see those, and I'm glad now the narrative is changing. People are kind of speaking about this, and the reason I bring it up is because you've been doing a lot of content lately about you know, female representation in fiction, and you. I mean, I assume you haven't talked about this because it's pretty not well known as a series, and then also a lot of it comes in later. But it's just some of the best, like it's the most feminist work I think I've ever read, especially by a man. And for the fact that like near the end, like almost everybody in power is a woman, and it doesn't feel like he was like, I'm going to make sure that all the women are in power to make us like it's literally just like all of these women did all of these things, and it resulted in this. And I just like I really hope people give it more credit.
It's hard to talk about it because I feel like I can't go in depth. Like, you know, there's just so much stuff I want to say, but I'm just like, you just got to read it. That's what I always tell
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
But it's one of the best because the women are the villains, the women are the hero, the women are the leaders, and it's like you said, it's never forced in any
Hmm.
way. And you know, I find one of my probably favorite things in the series is when Cooney is trying to set up Thera to be his successor, and then she leaves. It was just such an interesting subvert of what
Hmm.
I expected that to be.
Yeah, that was very
And
shocking.
and I kept thinking, well, Thera's just going to come back, but she never does. I mean, she does, but doesn't. She never does.
Yeah.
She never comes, and her role is not in Dara, and it ends up being someone that completely different, and still the daughter of Timu, you know, and Timu, who nobody wanted to be in power, and that the way
Hmm.
that was subverted was just so interesting. And I remember if it was you or Jimmy from the Fantasy Network talking to me about how Timu's story also subverts tropes because it is usually the woman who is stuck in that position
Hmm.
and not a
It could have
man.
been both of us, but we've definitely talked about this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think he was talking about that after Wall of Storms. And I had never even thought of it that way, but like even his male characters often subvert these tropes, and Timu seeing his abuse was really different since we're used to only seeing that from a woman, from a man to a woman versus the other way
Hmm.
around. And I think his series does that so well because you don't even realize it's happening, which is, I think, the best. Then that's how you know it's done well.
Yeah, I always come back to like George R. R. Martin famously, like somebody's like, "How do you write female characters so well?" And he's like, "Well, I don't mean to be like point out the obvious, but like women are just people." And I feel like he just writes people, and that's including with men. And I think that in both genders, he really points out how much strength is not just being able to pick up a sword and fight, or to be able to lead people into combat. Like Timu is a strong character, and he would never win in a fight. He gets killed by no to me, the most basic loser person. He's probably like 70 at the time it happens too, so he's like just a loser old man. So like he's not strong. But Timu is in a terrible situation. He is being abused, and he is trying to do what is right in the situation. And teeth on the board, right? Like that's his whole mantra that he
On the
gets from
board.
Gia, and he keeps like he does whatever he can to save even a little bit of the culture, to save a little bit of the people, to make their lives a little bit better. And he does it to to his own suffering. Like every time we see Timu, he's just like suffering, and that is such a strong character. And it is not a character you see from a male perspective that much. That is then treated as like not like it could have been easy for like the narrative to treat Timu as like a weak character, but Ken never does. That we're always on Timu's side.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And you just saying teeth on the board, I think this series has given me more things I think about in my life. Just period. Like just the other day, I was like, do the most interesting thing, Bookborn. Do the most interesting thing. Like for some reason that just like sometimes will get in my head. Or weigh the fish. I don't know. He just has some taglines that I really wish we could just kind of bring into our everyday. The universe is knowable. I really loved that one too. I was like, I need to print a few of these on a t-shirt or a mug, just to remind myself.
More Dandelion Dynasty merch in general.
We do. I'll make some for us. I got my Cricut now. Yeah. I'll go make some for us. And teeth on the board. There's just so many good themes that he does such a good job of every character playing them out in different ways, again, without telling you. And that's why I think that story we talked about, that's 686 pages in, is so strong because it lays out all of the themes in such an interesting way. Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those series that's going to stick with me.
Also, actually, when we were talking about subverting characters, this character honestly snuck up on me. Aya, Jin's daughter.
Oh, yes.
Is an amazing side character. Like her trajectory, because she's so clearly trying to live up to her mom's legacy and be this like brilliant military strategy, and she's just an idiot. Like not like an idiot in life, but like an idiot in military strategy. And she just constantly, and she's like has this like cognitive dissonance where she'll screw things up and she'll be like, well, the book said. And then at the end for Farah to finally like take her off the like to demote her or whatever, and then she cries and she's like, thank you so much. I was just like, wow.
I did that moment made me a little emotional because the whole time, because Aya, when we first meet her, is like art, like she's like doing all this random stuff, and then all of a sudden everything that goes down with her mom is like this trauma, and she just feels like she has to be this person. And the catharsis of Farah finally being like, you're fired, you're terrible, don't do this, and like the relief, you're just like, yeah.
And then they just go back to being friends. Yeah.
I actually could have probably read more about Aya. Like I think I could have read more about her, like and her struggle. I think it's a very relatable struggle for a lot of people.
And that's the thing too, is that
we both said that's the thing. I was gonna say every side character has this deep story.
That's what I was gonna say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And
there's always these side characters. Like I mean, there's too much to talk about in these books in a short video, but even like Fan Kikoru and Radia being killed, who especially Fan, who has been like the minorist of, like he's on the level where like you just always know who he is, but you never have any investment in him. Like Radia at least like does think it more in the narrative, and both of them die. And when they die, I was supremely invested, and I almost cried when Fan died. And he's like this minor, but just like he's like, oh, I've never been this person that. I'm not as good at raiding as Puma, and I'm not as smart as Luan, and he's doing all these things, and he's like, he's just the guy that lived because he's worse at everything else. And then he finally dies, and he's like, how am I going to meet all these people in the afterlife? Like that was incredibly affecting in like 3 pages. And I just, that is just, oh, I love that scene so much.
It's almost annoying. You're like, could you just let me have a character that doesn't bother me? Like just for like a few pages. I need to not be bothered. Yeah. I mean, there's so much we could talk about that there isn't time for, but I think it was great. The end.
Yeah. I'm so happy that people are finding it now. Like I knew Jimmy would really like it. I knew Patrick would really like it. Leanna, like I'm so glad she just gave Grace of Kings 5 stars. So I hope that she continues to like it. And I honestly think that it was given, like the series was given a bit of the short shift at the beginning. I think just because of marketing is probably a big thing. Also, we have now seen a big significant rise in Asian authors and Asian cultures being in fantasy. And we have to keep in mind that when Grace of Kings was released, he was almost the first one. Like there might be somebody else I'm not aware of, but like it just wasn't something that was happening in epic fantasy. So I think a lot of people would have just been thrown off by like the non-narrative conventions that we're used to in Western fantasy. And so now I think people are coming back to this series, and I'm just so happy that it is getting more recognition. I've seen almost nobody not at least like Grace of Kings. Like sometimes the narrative isn't going to really work for people, and I would really like encourage those people to get to Wall of Storms. But
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just really, really happy that this is
I'm really
happening.
excited. You and I are both we're doing the fight. We're fighting the good fight about this series. We're just
Yeah,
when I will, I'm gonna start like I'm fighting the good fight over Ken Liu. Forcing on people. I'm really excited that the series is done because I think it's just
yes.
gonna be so much easier to tell people like it's 4 books, it's long, but it's done. And I can tell you that the whole narrative is absolutely worth it. It ends amazing. And I think that is going to help people feel confident about putting the time into it. I think Grace
Mhm,
of Kings can be, even though I quite liked Grace of Kings, obviously.
mhm,
I do understand, like, I understood what Ken was doing, in my opinion. Like, I didn't think it was sexist because I kind of saw the undertones of what was happening. I do
mhm.
think people can misread Grace of Kings. So I do
Yeah,
try to tell people, like, you have to understand that that narratively works with the rest of the series. And trust me, you will get female leads that are amazing. And like you said, by Speaking Bones, that's pretty much all you have
mhm.
is amazing female leads. So I loved it. You loved it. It was great.
5 stars.
4.5, but the series as a whole, you know.
Is Wall of Storms your favorite in the series? Have you decided? Or is it
I
this
have
one?
decided that Wall of Storms, I think, is my favorite in the series.
Yeah, me too. It's just hard to beat. Like, it's just such a good thing all the way through. Didn't make me
Yeah.
as angry.
I think they're all very close though.
Yeah,
There, there's not a big step between any of them. I would say probably Veiled Throne is my least favorite in the series.
same. It's not very
As a
fair to it, though. It's half a book.
It's half a book, and that's why I think is unfair. And it's half a book where the other half is the conclusion.
Yeah.
So obviously, this one's going to be like amazing and make me feel a lot. So, but overall, there's very little. There's like a half star step between these. So
Mhm,
it's I think all really good. But if people watching have read, obviously, hopefully read the whole series, I would love to know your favorite characters, what you think about Gia, and your favorite parts of the book, what you rated it. So far, I mean, it's not out yet, so everyone loves it because it's like we're all the super fans reading it right now.
mhm.
But I'm hoping everyone loves it as much as we did.
Yeah. I've heard a lot more positive feedback for Veiled Throne than I was expecting more people to not like the cooking section, but so far I've seen mostly positive, so hopefully if you can stick to that, I mean, I think Speaking Bones is gonna be a
Well, I
win for
think
most people.
if you've made it through Veiled Throne, it'd be pretty hard to abandon the series at that point.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. There's too many loose ends, but I think it's going to be a great, and I'm just really excited. I think this series just deserves more, and I keep making videos telling people that this series deserves more, and so I hope it just eventually between us and Jimmy and Leanna, I guess we can get them all on board. Hopefully, we'll get people on
Mhm.
board. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for
Alright, thanks
talking
for
about
having
it
me
with me,
on.
Kyle. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Bye, guys.
anytime. Bye.